Victor Wembanyama got dunked on in a game the other day, which means, of course, he is going to be one of the biggest busts in NBA history. Or at least, that's what NBA Twitter was telling me the other day based on one clip out of context. See, the player that dunked on Wemby actually got blocked by him multiple times and stopped by him multiple times in the possessions previous. This is the one time that he managed to score on Wembanyama, but of course, the one clip of him getting physically bodied was enough for people to declare that he's going to be a bust. So you might think I'd blame those people for just being, for lack of a better term, but in reality, I blame the NBA media and I blame the NBA for how much they are shoving this guy in people's faces, because this is a cycle we've seen a million times before. It's just been expedited by Wemby's hype. Let's talk about it. Before I continue on this video, if you end up enjoying it, please be sure to subscribe. Also drop a like to help the video do better in the YouTube algorithm, and check out my second channel where I'm uploading a lot more frequently with a lot more higher quality videos. It's just kind of stuff that's off of the cuff and not really worthy of main channel discussion, but things like Russell Westbrook's Clippers debut or small trades, all that stuff gets discussed over there. So Wembanyama has already fallen on the bad side of the hype cycle. Let me go ahead and lay these steps out for you. A big prospect, in this case for Wemby, literally, because he's 7'5", a prospect that is expected to be a great player, just comes out of nowhere. And the NBA hypes that player up, the NBA media hypes that player up. There's a lot of build up to that player being in the league. The best recent example of this would be like Zion Williamson. Then that player comes in the league, and for a few years, they are phenomenal. And then people start to turn on them as they don't quite get crazy accolades immediately. It's something we're already seeing happen with, Luka Doncic. It's something we're seeing happen with Nikola Jokic after he's going for his third MVP this year, Eventually, people start to turn on the player and the young player that they were hyped up for. And that's to be expected. However, this cycle has been expedited by the NBA's coverage of Wembanyama. If you are not aware, Victor Wembanyama games can be streamed directly by the NBA routinely. His highlights posted directly by the NBA routinely. Something you really don't see happen before an NBA player or before a prospect even enters the NBA, and yet here it is. And we've reached this point where people have talked about Wemby so much, and he's had so many highlights posted specifically by the NBA. He's been talked about so much by NBA media that people begin to turn on him. Now, I hate this aspect of human nature, but it is one that exists, and it's one that could be avoided if the first step of that process was just tuned down. I think the worst thing you can do for a young player heading into the NBA is give them a bunch of hype. In hindsight, I look back at someone like Andrew Wiggins, for example, or I look back at someone like Lonzo Ball, for example, and I'm just like, how have we helped these players in any way by projecting these, superstar level expectations onto them? Because if you look at where Lonzo Ball ended up before he got hurt, that's the most recent video on this channel. If you look at Andrew Wiggins and the success that he's had in Golden State, those players should have been allowed to be what they ended up being, rather than being viewed necessarily as disappointments or busts because they didn't end up being those players. But more importantly, in the case of Wemby, I think what bothers me the most about the criticism of him is it's entirely unfair. Let's look at this tweet from Kendrick Perkins, of course, a basketball savant who never says anything stupid. Just imagine what Giannis and Embiid are going to do to him. God bless America. So first of all, Joel Embiid and Giannis are not from America, so I don't really get the God bless America thing, other than maybe the fact that the NBA is America plus Canada. But yeah, that's besides the point. It's just weird. More importantly, Victor Wembanyama isn't going to be a good NBA player if he can't stop Giannis or Joel Embiid. That's what's being implied here, and that's what's implied pretty explicitly all the time with players of Wemby's archetype. Let's take this back to Evan Mobley. I think Wemby has a million times more offensive potential than Evan Mobley does, but at least defensively, I would say they're on a, similar tier as prospects, at least from what I understand. I'm not a genius prospect guy. I very rarely talk about it. But a big forward, a tall, long, athletic forward who somewhat mobile player, but primarily a rim protector type of ordeal. That's the type of archetype that both of these players fall into. And people said the same thing about Evan Mobley. He's too skinny to defend these players. And as it turns out, that's not true. He is one of the 10 best defensive players in the league, pretty much at a bare minimum in my opinion. And while there's the occasional possession where somebody might body that player, this doesn't happen. Like, players being a little skinny does not debilitate them defensively to the extent that so many people act as though it does. It just simply doesn't. Kevin Garnett was skinny. He was not routinely getting bullied by players, and no one was saying, well, that kid can't defend Shaq, so how good is he gonna be? Are you kidding me? It's a ridiculous, stupid argument that doesn't make any sense. Not only is it not true that Wemby is probably going to get bodied every freaking possession like this one guy did to him, one on his 7th attempt, but two, not being able to stop Giannis and Joel Embiid is applicable to 99.8% of the entire league. And for that 0.2% of players who are capable of defending Giannis or Joel Embiid one-on-one at a good level, at a good rate, those players are far and few between, and even those players are not doing it consistently. There is not a single player in the league that can consistently every single time lock down Joel Embiid or Giannis. There's players who've done it at times. There's players who've done it more times than you would expect, but nobody is shutting down these players one-on-one with regularity. So I don't understand how that's a criticism of Victor Wembanyama whatsoever. But the reason why we're seeing these points, even to begin with, again, is because this guy is just shoved in people's faces. Now, me personally, I can ignore that type of stuff, but people are looking for a reason to hate. That's kind of just the nature of NBA fan. And I think the media and I think the NBA is doing a massive disservice to these young players by setting up these expectations. They are pretty deliberately and pretty significantly setting Wemby up to fail. They set up Andrew Wiggins to fail. When he was a couple of years into his career and he really wasn't all that, there was the bus talk, of course. And now, I mean, I've kind of changed my perspective on this. I used to think, even though after he did make the All-Star team, like, he didn't really live up to the expectations. I don't know if I care about that anymore, especially if those expectations are not fair, especially if those expectations are outlandish. There are a lot of people who I know in the draft circle of things who said, yeah, people overhyped the hell out of Andrew Wiggins. He was not even really supposed to be the #1 pick in that draft. Joel Embiid just had injury issues. So it's not helping anything. So why do we keep doing it other than to continually generate clicks in this media machine? Like, I understand why this happens. There's a profit incentive. Making a video or an article or whatever about Victor Wembanyama tends to lead to clicks and views and all that. But if it comes at the cost of this player being hated on significantly, the mental health effects that would come with that, and all of the above, it's not worth it. At the very least, it is not worth it on a human and moral level. But of course, the media, giant mega corporations, they don't operate on what is moral and what is right and what is good for literally an 18, 19-year-old. They don't care, and they're never going to care, and I can't really expect them to. But at the very least, I can sit in front of a camera for 12 minutes and complain about it. But yeah, that's my thoughts. I'm so tired of seeing this cycle happen, and in the case of Wemby, it's so blatant. Like, it's so clear, the cycle, because it happened so fast. Seeing people turn on a player before they've even entered the league is truly a crazy experience, and I just wish that we could be better. Both NBA fans, because they still bear some responsibility for their reactions, and the media that knows that they are poking a bear and bringing hate towards this player that is entirely unnecessary. Anyways, shout out to Rudy for editing this video, and goodbye.